Okay.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Just due to the way the webinar is administered, just so you know, you're all muted just to avoid feedback during the session. So as we go, if you have an immediate issue that you need to address, then you can either enter a question or a chat message, and we'll try to watch those. The last time we did one of these webinars, it was actually quite difficult to track all of the chats during our presentation. So we're planning to leave time at the end where you'll be able to ask questions. Sometimes that's a little difficult with a large group like this, but we'll do the best we can to answer questions as we go, and also feel free to email us if it's a question that you feel only affects your agency or your interaction with the gateway. So I just wanted to start knowing that some people on the line are new to the gateway, just to remind everyone what the gateway is. The gateway is really an online data management system that's used by local mosquito control agencies, including yours throughout the state, the California Department of Public Health, and then we host that here at UC Davis. So the computer is here, but all of you interact with it through the web interface. And this is part of our partnership for arbovirus surveillance and control throughout the state. So this is a major mechanism for data sharing, and really a way that the maps are generated, the reporting that Cdph does, and also ultimately the maps that CDC has for West Nile virus come from this system as well. So I'm just starting with about 3 slides as an overview of the gateway, and then we'll move into the use of the gateway itself. So the gateway has a number of data flows associated with it. It all starts with your MVCAC local agencies entering data, usually from field collections of some sort, whether it's mosquitoes, dead birds, or sentinel chickens. There are mechanisms for entering lab results, either at our central labs in Richmond and Davis or in local agencies. And then from that come all of the reports that you are familiar with that come to your agencies each week. They also update the maps automatically and then keep a historical database to archive all of these data. This is what the gateway user interface looks like when you attempt to log on the first time. So when you go to gateway.calsurv.org, you just come to a relatively empty site that has the option to log into the website. At that point, once you log in, you can proceed to do whatever tasks you would like to do within your agency. That depends on what you need to do within your agency. So within each agency, there's at least one agency manager. And those people are not necessarily the agency manager. They're the people who are designated as the decision makers in terms of access. And some people need to enter mosquito collections, for example, but would not need to enter test results or manage other aspects of the data. So within each agency, you can set your own privileges. Another central tenet of our statewide system is that your agencies own the data. So when you put data in the gateway, the data don't belong to us. They don't belong to Cdph, although we all need to interact with them and do things for surveillance. But in terms of research purposes and using your data for research and other things downstream, they ultimately belong to you. So there's a process for requesting permission for the data statewide, but also individual people can come to you at your agency and ask for your data. And if you're interested in giving them to them, then you have ways to export the data. So we'll go over some of those things today, but as an overview of what we'll cover today, we'll be talking about how you can configure the gateway system for your agency to make sure everyone is has the right permissions to do what they need to do. We'll go over a whole range of data entry interfaces and just talk through how you would put the data in for each of those. We'll go through calculators, which are ways that you can make use of your data to help you make decisions from day to day. And then at the end, Jodi will talk a bit about ways that you can interface with the data, either through imports, exports, or through web services, which are ways to hook your own software into the gateway's underlying database. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jodi, and he's going to start through a number of the features of the gateway. And as I mentioned, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat and the questions as we go. So if there's something urgent and you'd like to ask, then just enter it there as we go.
All right. So we want to start going through the data entry interface. So the very first, the foundation of surveillance is the site records. So we'll go through entering in a new site and then managing sites. So the very first thing that we have, there's a lot of interface options within the gateway that are prevalent throughout, and just to make sure everyone knows how to use everything. So here we have the we're for this demonstration we're using Shasta has allowed us to present as a member of their agency, and we're doing everything on the sandbox. So the sandbox is it has all the data from the live site sent over every week, but it allows you to enter in data without worrying about messing up the live data. So anything that we do won't actually affect their real data. So now we're looking at the list of surveillance sites that Shasta has, and so a couple of things that we wanted to go over in our interface is anytime you're presented with a list of records, we allow you to sort them by any of the fields. You just have to click on the field at the top to sort them, and then down at the bottom there's usually a search for most of the listings. So right now it's paginated to 25 records. If you want to adjust that, you can change it to whatever you want. And any of the fields you can start typing in text, and then it'll allow you to filter to any of the fields that are shown. So just in case people had never used that before. So after so this is a listing of all the sites that match that filter. So we're going to go through creating a new site. So the two most important things about a site record are the code, which is a 6-digit number that has to be unique to your agency. It doesn't have to be unique throughout the state, but it has to be unique to your agency. And so when you start typing in a code, you are allowed to organize these however you wish. Like I said, they just have to be unique. So if you start typing in a code that is already in use, you'll get a message as soon as you leave the field. So that's to ensure that they're unique. And on the right side, you'll see a very complex list of numbers that show you what you've already used and what is available to you. But the main thing is that you'll get an error message right away if you type one that's already used. So once you pick out a number that's unique, you can another thing we wanted to go over is that any of the fields within the gateway, if you hover over them with your mouse, you'll get a little bit of a help message to help you try to figure out what we're asking for. So that's just about every field in the gateway has some type of message to guide you. So the next field is a site name. This allows you to just, if you want a description of the site that is, whatever you would like to name it is fine with us. Here we have the coordinates interface. You can enter in direct latitude, longitude, or you can pick a place on the map to enter in the field. I mean, enter in the site. So all you need to do is just click wherever you would like the site to be located. If there happens to be an address that you want to use, and there's a geocode field, so you can start typing in an address, and then hit geocode, and it will attempt to find it using Google for you. And once you place the site, it will automatically fill in the latitude, longitude for you. And then, oh, and yeah, if you select a site and you accidentally place it in the wrong location, you can quickly move it around to wherever you'd like. These fields are not required, but they're very helpful, as complete as you can to fill in the interface, because if you fill in a site and then it turns out you ended up putting up in the wrong location, but you have the address listed and the address is correct, you can figure out where it was supposed to be, or we can figure out where it's supposed to be, and it's helpful to be as descriptive as possible, but it's not required. So we can automatically get the elevation for the site by clicking. I guess that place didn't have an elevation. Is that? So we have the address field, and then, well, I don't know, red. So these are the address fields. Also, you can geocode this way if you type in an address, and you can get it to locate on the map for you. And then on the map, any of the green markers are existing sites around where you are placing the site. So just so that if you weren't aware that you already placed a site nearby, that you can either reuse it or decide what to do at that point. Here we have the surroundings. This is just to be as descriptive as possible about what is going on with the site. You can also create custom surroundings if you like. You can see Shasta created a campground surrounding, and so if you needed to add new ones, you can do so here. And then there's a population classification field, which we can try to determine it automatically by hitting the classify button. And once you're done with everything, you can hit save or add new site, and it will save it into the database.
So just to highlight the most important pieces of information, Jodi mentioned the code is the number one piece of information that's a unique reference for that site. We do now allow you to reuse codes in the sense that you can have a code that corresponds to a single location and then actually change the location over time. But at any one moment in time, that code has to have a unique site associated with it. And then the coordinates matter a lot. So the exact location of the site is really important. So put it in the right place on the map, or put the coordinates in from your GPS unit, which I think fewer and fewer people are using. But do that in some particular way to make sure those sites are in the right place. The rest of the information is largely descriptive and really useful if you get the location wrong or discover an error later. So I would encourage you to enter it, but the most important pieces are the code and the exact location of the site.
So one of the as Chris said, that you can reuse codes, or you can adjust them however you like. One of the things that might not be apparent to everybody is that, so when we have a site, we allow for revisions to that site. So you can take a code and you can adjust the location, and that can either become a new revision of that code, of that site, or it can change it throughout, change where it was in the past. So when you take an existing site and you try to edit it, you will see a red circle around the site. if you move the site anywhere within that circle, that will actually permanently adjust that site going forward and then back in history. So if I say I made 20 collections at this site last year, if I adjust where it is and then hit save, it will actually change those 20 collections that I did last year. So if you move it outside of the circle, that creates a new revision of that site. So that would mean that the 20 collections that we did previously are not affected by this change. Another a way to adjust this is to use this checkbox here. If you check this checkbox, it will change the site collections throughout history, and then it would be the same as moving it outside of the circle. So if I if or if I move it outside of the circle and I click the checkbox, that actually creates if I don't check the checkbox, it creates a new revision which allows me to it won't change the history of the site. So you can view the revisions here. So this site we've been editing it a little bit, and so you can see all the changes. So the any collections that were made between these two time points would stay at that location, and then if we change it, it changes again. So this is not a feature that everybody will necessarily be using, but if you have all your codes and you want to reorganize them, you need to make sure that they're marked as corrections, not corrections, as revisions, so that you don't affect the historical collections.
There's really two cases where you'd want to change site locations in the gateway, and that's the reason for the checkbox that Jodi mentioned. So either you're correcting the site because you realize that it's actually in the wrong place, so you intend to correct that for all time, and you can move it, and in that case, just check the checkbox at the bottom. If you're actually moving the site today, let's say, and all future collections will be at a different location associated with that code, that's when you actually move the location, do not check the checkbox, and what that time stamps the change such that for all future collections from that site, they will be at the new location. So that checkbox is just trying to distinguish between those two things, where it's actually a correction to the spatial data and relocations of the site being the opposite case.
And so the last item we have for editing sites are site groupings. So you can take a number of sites and you can create a group out of them, and then later on when we show the calculators, you can use these groups of sites to run calculations or just to track data. So the next area that we have are mosquito collections. So one of the things that might not be apparent to many people is that we have a configuration for the collections. So the first one is you could select the species that are applicable to your agency. So these are used in the calculators as well. So when you are running the calculations, the only species that show up are the ones that you have checked. So if a species is not in your area, then you can filter the list down.
You'll also notice that list goes well beyond mosquitoes, and that was just to account for other collections that your agencies do. You'll even see things like yellow jackets. There are other flies in there. So most of your agencies don't deal with those, but if you do, they're in there and you can check them as an option.
And then the other config option we have are trap types. So you're allowed to select we have a number of trap types in the gateway, so you can select the ones that your agency uses. One of the things that we introduced very recently are presence traps. So you'll see some traps that have two options. They have the regular trap option and then the presence option. The presence option allows you to specify a trap where you're not exactly going to specify the counts. So it'll provide a checkbox instead of a number field. So you can just say if the mosquito was present or absent at that location versus an actual number. And we'll demonstrate that really quickly. So here is the mosquito collection interface, and the very first thing you want to do is define a trap that you're going to that you used. So these are specified from that last configuration screen. So once you select the trap, you need to specify a date, and this will allow us to view the sites that were active at that date. So here are the lists of all the sites in your agency. So you can select a site, and then it will fill in the coordinates for you, and you can view it on the map just to double check things. One of the features that we have is if you do a one-time collection, what you can do is if you select site code 0, where every agency has site code 0, which is just it's actually wherever your office is said to be located. So what this does is it provides you with a map that you can drop down a point, and that'll be a one-time collection where you don't need a site to be defined there. So if you just happen to go somewhere and maybe you found 80s Egypti at that location, but it's not actually a place that you collect regularly, you can define that, and that way we know exactly where you found it, and then it'll fill in the coordinates for you.
If you choose other registered site codes, you can't move the site. So only the 0 site code allows you to define the location on the fly.
Yeah. So actually, it's not supposed to. And the same thing we have on the map for the sites. You can also geocode a location if you select site code 0. So you can if you knew the address. And so here we have the person who made the collection. This checkbox is if you ran into any issues, you would uncheck this, and that would indicate that there was a problem with the collection. And then what you can type in the comments field, whatever the issues were at that time. And so here we have the collection interface. This has all of the species available in the gateway, but you can just start typing, and then it'll narrow it down for you. And then these are the number fields, because this is a trap type that's specified to do exact numbers. So you can type in whatever area whatever you found, and
you'll notice if you choose for females, very few agencies actually sort females by their reproductive status. So there's unfed, blood-fed, and gravid. And if you actually separate those, you can type them in separately. But you'll notice when Jodi just entered 100 females mixed, that means you're not distinguishing between categories of females, and the others get grayed out.
So another item we wanted to highlight here was that when you make a collection, you can automatically create the pools in the gateway from this collection. So what this does is this will create new pools that are tied exactly to this collection, so that you might be entering in pools manually through the other way, but this allows it to tie it to more data, which is the collection event. So when we'll go over you need, the first thing you need for the pool is to the pool collection number. Usually you want to go sequentially throughout the year, and this field allows you to define other sites that were associated with this. Right now we would have it tied to this one-time field, but if you had others defined sites that you also wanted to specify, you could add those numbers here, and then you would type in the species, and then the sex, and then if you had any comments, you could add them here, and this will allow present the text field to type in. Another thing we wanted to highlight with this is anytime there's a table, you can click on the row number, just a left click, and it'll provide an interface to quickly either copy the row, insert a new row, or delete the row. So in this case, we had 100 mosquitoes and we wanted to create 2 pools of 50 out of them. We could just click the copy this row and then adjust the pool number. We have to delete this row. And now we can quickly create all of our pools that way. Or if we made a mistake, we can go ahead and wipe out that row. So that's the collection interface. Now, after you enter in the collections, you can view collection management here. This is the same interface that we went over. You can search and sort, and you can change the year. You can either define the exact week, or you can, if you unselect, you can do the whole year. Once you put the collections in,
just to mention also with collection management, that's also your place to edit collections. So after you've created the collections, as Jodi just did, you can go in and find that list, waiting for it to load. And then for every collection, if you need to make a correction, you can actually click edit, and that takes you right back into an interface that's very much like the new collection interface, and you can then make changes as needed. The other point to make about collection date is that this is the ending date of the trap. So that's the day you pick up the trap. And then you'll notice that just to the right of that, based on the number of trap nights, it tells you what it's assuming was the start date for the trap. So it assumes if you say 1 trap night, you picked it up on the 13th, you started it on the 12th. Let you get back to what you were doing.
A few of the legacy features that we have that may or may not be useful is we allow automatic creation of collection worksheets. So you can define a set of sites and a number of traps and then a number of mosquitoes. And what will happen is it'll automatically create a collection worksheet for you, just in case this is something that you don't already have. So what it does is creates a worksheet with all the sites you listed and all the species you listed, and that way you can bring that to the field and print it out and write down all your collection numbers. So just in case you don't have those available. And then we also have collection reports that will quickly generate either a spreadsheet or a Word doc of your collection numbers for specified time frames. You don't, the occurrence report was, I guess, used to be faxed in, but it doesn't need, not necessary anymore, but just in case it's a set of data that you wanted to quickly look at other than doing it through the data export, which we'll cover later. And the last section in the Arthropod area is the pool section. So you can create mosquito pools that that you would test on. So this is the same interface as on the collection page. So if you create a pool here, you can define where you collected it, but we don't have it's just not as complete as tying it when you do the collection. So
it's not explicitly linked to a collection. It would be linked to a site and a date. And so if the only trap you ran at that site on that date was a single trap, then you would actually know where it came from. But otherwise, it wouldn't be explicitly linked to a collection.
And so after you create the pools, if you send the pools to UC Davis for testing, we can create submissions automatically. So what you would do here is you would, after you define the pools, you can check off the pools that you were sending to us for testing, and then create a new submission for them. And that provides a way of us to track when pools are coming in for testing, and then once we receive them, we check them off, and you receive an email saying that we received it. And then it also gives us a way to report back testing results to you. So you click off the pool that you wanted to submit, and then hit create a new submission, and it's marked on our side that we should be expecting that pool to arrive. After the pools are tested, you can check out the test result management and see all the test results. So, and then here's a case where there was a positive pool, and you can view the results. There we go. And you'll see calculator options on these menus, but Chris is going to go over those all in one section, which is the calculator section.
Okay, so I'll just cover Sentinel chickens and the way you would enter those data. I know that only pertains to some of you, but there's quite a few agencies who use this module. And I talked with Tina and Leslie this morning about the way Sentinel chickens and dead birds get entered. So I'll just give an overview of how those data are managed. So under Sentinel in the gateway, there's a module for flocks and bands. And at the start of each year, you have to go in and create flocks, and that's your way of quickly creating collections later that are linked to those flocks. So the first thing you would do is create a new flock. So you would just go in and define that flock. You can see year is listed, so you can choose which year. In this case, we'll choose 2016. We would choose the registered site associated with that flock, so I'll just choose one. And then below that, what you have is a choice of bands. And those are the band numbers that are issued by Tina Feisley at Cdph. So at the start of each year, to keep all of the testing straight, every agency has its own unique set of bands. You can add your own local agency bands, but those are separately recorded, and they have to be associated with a state identifier as well. And then in this case, I'll go through and put the first 6 bands associated with this flock, assign those. So now this flock at this site has this set of bands associated with that, and then you could click Add New Flock. So at that point, you get the little green banner at the top saying the flock has been successfully added. You can go back, you could either add another new flock, or in this case, I'll go back to the Sentinel menu. If you want to see all of your flocks at any one time, you can go to Flock Management. This is for 2015 by default. If I choose 2016, change year, all you see is that one flock I just created. I'll, just for convenience, go back to last year. So these are the flocks that Shasta ran last year. These are the sites associated with them. You can also get a quick overview of how many positives that were confirmed last year. If there's a need to edit them, you can go in, and the situation where you'd want to edit flocks is to deactivate chickens. So once you've created flocks at the start of the year, as the year progresses, if you remove chickens from that flock, either because they seroconverted or because the chicken died, this is your place to do that. So you go to Flock Management, edit the particular flock of interest. And when you click edit, this is the module that shows up. So you have band IDs, which are the particular band numbers that you've already created earlier in the season. You don't want to deactivate the flock. You actually never really need to deactivate flocks. It's really the band numbers that need to be deactivated. The problem with deactivating flocks is that the flock sort of disappears from some of the reporting mechanisms as well as other visualizations of data. So there's no reason to really deactivate a flock because you create them at the start of every year. They're unique identities for that year, and then you would start over again the next year, but just leave them active. The only thing you really need to deactivate is the chickens. So when you uncheck that box, that means that chicken is no longer going to be bled in future collections, and that chicken won't appear when you create your collections. It doesn't remove any data associated with that chicken, but it means as of today, that chicken is no longer in service. So going back to flock management, or let's go back to, I'll just click Sentinel. So we've gone through new flocks, flock management. Now we'll talk about collections. So after the flocks have been defined, as the season goes on, then you want to create collections, which is when you actually go out and take the blood samples from the combs of the chickens, send them in on the filter paper. This is where that happens. So create a new collection. In this case, I'll just choose 2015 because we've got more options for flocks last year because they're already defined. You pick which flock, so one of those must be inactive. So we see 4 flocks, and we'll pick one of those. And you see what happens is all of the bands that are active appear below. So for that flock in 2015, it generates a record for every band. You enter a collection date. You can either type it in or you can click the calendar. I'll pretend we're doing it April 13th. Don't think Peter runs chicken flocks anymore, but we'll put him as the collector. And then all the band IDs are there. If for some reason you realize that one of them should not be included, you can actually uncheck it here. For convenience, it's easy to deactivate it, but if you didn't deactivate it, you can just uncheck one of them and that collapses that. In most cases, for the initial submission, you will not be submitting whole blood, but this is where if Cdph requested whole blood as a confirmation on a particular flock, you would go through and enter whole bloods as well. Do it the same way. Check only the boxes for the whole bloods you're submitting, and then check that it's whole blood. And then when you click Add New Collection, that collection will become a record that then Cdph can see when they add the test results. Let's see, chickens. And then the other place you might want to go, I won't go through adding new test results because there's very few people actually needing to add test results, but you might need to go to test result management. And that's where either you go to flock management, as I did before, and you can work your way in through edit to find records for the positives, or you can go straight to the test. So if you go to test result management instead of flock management, you see by collection what was collected over your year at your district. So in this case, you can see at each of these sites on this date, there were 8 bands bled, none were positive early in the season. And then, as Jodi mentioned, if you want to just see them all, you can choose all. Oh, and because I've filtered it, let's see, change month and year. All right, so if you just put 2015, don't limit the month, then you get all of the year's collections. And that gives you a quick overview of which flocks are positive, and if you go into view, that will give you the details. So you'll actually be able to see for every band, which is here, you can see all of the results for West Nile, St. Louis encephalitis, and Western equine. You can see whether they were negative or positive. And if you scroll through the season or through the band numbers for that particular collection, you'll see this one was confirmed for West Nile, initially pending for West Nile or SLE because it was a flavivirus positive, but ultimately turned out to be West Nile. So this is a quick way to get an overview of your test results and to see the details of what's being tested at Cdph. You can also see the methods. So in this case, EIAs or IFAs, so they're using IFA for the confirmation in that case. the EIA had turned up positive, which doesn't distinguish between West Nile and SLE. So you're seeing all of those results, which are all associated with that one original collection. So that's about it for sentinel chickens. So I'll move to carcass. And carcass, you'll notice some of these headers are pretty general. So arthropod is any arthropod technically, but mostly mosquitoes for your agencies. Could be ticks and other arthropods if you were testing those. Carcass as well is originally intended to encompass birds, squirrels, and anything else you might want to test as vertebrates samples. So I'll start off with the reporting. So one thing some districts I think are not aware of is that if your district picks up a bird, let's say your staff finds a dead bird or someone calls your district directly and somehow that report didn't go through the hotline and you need a way to enter those data, you can either call the hotline yourself, which is what some do, or you can actually enter the report in the gateway, which goes into the same database and generates the same sort of submission ID that would happen if you call the hotline. Either way is fine. This just gives you a direct way to do that. So I'll go to new report, which is the case where you need to create a dead bird report directly, sort of acting as hotline staff, if you will. So you would go in here and then choose the date on which you're reporting the bird. Let's say it's today. Caller name Jodi Simpson. You would put phone number, all of the additional information associated with the caller. If that person is you or one of your district staff, you're welcome to put anybody from the district there. It might be useful actually to have callback phone numbers put here for your district if you're the one actually reporting it. You can put in the address. Okay, county and that.
And Chris,
Yes.
can I jump in?
Sure.
This is Leslie, my little 2 cents. When you enter the city name, it's really helpful to always enter the same spelling and always capitalize the city. Otherwise, it will come up in the system as a different city, and then you'll forever have that as a different city. So it's just helpful to always spell the names the same and capitalize them.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Spelling is absolutely critical for geocoding, and I didn't know about the capitalization either. So that's all about getting that bird to the right place. You can click geocode, which you notice populated the latitude and longitude fields for that. So that indicates that did find a real place. And then when you click the map, that actually shows you where that place is. So you can zoom in if you like. You can do all the things Google Maps offers, actually. And so you can either see that view or you can click satellite view on and see the actual houses. But that gives you an idea if you're in the right place. So if you click geocode and it went to the right place, that helps. I even neglected to enter the zip code, but it still can find it based on the other information. But I'm sure Leslie would recommend putting in all of the information you have in the most correct way possible in terms of spellings, and that way there's extra pieces of information if something ends up in the wrong place. Surroundings also are something to be recorded for birds, so it's useful to know, is this at someone's house, which is a common case, whether it's in a park, a school, and so on. So in this case, I'll just say it's at a home. If you have more than one bird to report, you can increase the numbers, and you'll notice that's also creating additional carcass records below. In this case, I'll just do one. Species, you click the drop-down menu, and as with everything else in the gateway, you can type any piece of the information. So you could, in this case, I even missed the A, and it's still giving me all of the pieces of information that have that in it. Let's say I want a crow. So see, just start typing crow. There's everything with crow, crowned, everything else showing up. So I'll pick American crow. Condition. This is a really critical piece of information to decide whether the bird is testable. So if the bird's been dead for a long time, it's ant infested, full of maggots, those sorts of things, those usually indicate they're not going to be tested. So what you'll notice, if you say the bird's dead greater than 24 hours, you can't actually click the buttons that say the carcass will be tested, because those are exclusion criteria that don't lead to testing. So let's say dead less than 24 hours, and then suddenly those become options. You can write any comments you want, put who collected the bird, and then down below indicate whether it's located on the street or a sidewalk, which is also an exclusion criterion. So if you say that it's on the street or a sidewalk, usually those are not picked up, and so you'll notice these buttons are again inactivated. Assuming you get all the way down and your bird's suitable for testing, you would then click carcass has been or will be tested if it will be tested. And that's either by your local agencies or by our lab here at Davis. If you're going to send in an RNA card for testing here in our lab at DART, then you would also check this button. So you would check carcass will be tested, carcass has been or will be sent to the state, which in this case just means our lab here at DART at UC Davis. Okay, Jody wants me to add one more bird. Okay, and if you have an additional crow, for example, you can copy this value down. So if you know that they're all essentially the same condition, same situation, sometimes happens with larger bird die-offs, then you can just click the copy button, which copies the fields down to the ones below. And that would propagate if you happen to have 5, which would be a rare case. Okay, so that's how to create a new report. When you do that, if you chose that bird will be sent on for testing, it will also generate the submission ID that is needed to identify that bird. So we'll go back to carcass again. When you go to report management after that, here I'm in April 2015. These are the Shasta reports from that year. So you'll notice that a lot of them don't have submission IDs, and that one was a hummingbird, there's robin, dove, other birds that weren't sent on for testing. Some of them are closed zip codes, some of them dead greater than 24 hours. So there's various reasons why those birds didn't get tested. In this particular case, it was submitted and canceled by agency, but it did get a submission ID, which means that bird was initially identified for testing. Let's go to another, perhaps more active month. So here's the July 2015 reports. You'll notice there's a number of them that are excluded for various reasons, but the ones that get submission IDs in the system have that here. Sometimes you need that at your agency just to know what the identifier is. So this is the way to find that after you've created the report. And you can also go in if there's a need to edit pieces of the information, where you can go in and change things related to that bird later. Only do that if it's a correction for sure. Don't change data too much if there's not an obvious need. And the other place you might want to go, just like with Sentinel chickens, is test result management. So just like with the reports, for all of those birds that have submission IDs and actually got tested, you can go in here and find your results. So you can pick the month and the year. You've got the submission ID associated with that bird, some information about the date and the species and all the other attributes of the bird, and then it shows whether it was confirmed positive. So this is a quick way, once your lab results are in the system, to see what's positive. For most agencies, that's the extent of it. If there are agencies who do local testing of dead birds, we're not covering that in the webinar just because it's a relatively limited interest as the state goes. So for those who want to know about that, you can feel free to contact us. Another possibility is we could have a short session on test data entry with the Lab Technologies Committee. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jodi for the application modules.
So next we'll be going over the pesticide application module. So before you can enter in your pesticide applications, the very first thing you need to do is configure all of your settings, which is under application and then config. So we need to define our equipment, technicians, and mixes of pesticides that we use. So each one of these options is they're fairly simple, but you need to set this up beforehand. Otherwise, you won't have any. The applications won't be complete. So for equipment, the main thing that we're looking for is just some identifier, which is we call the code. So this is just a way for you to reference it within the system. You can add manufacturer, model, serial number, and a description if you like, but they're not required.
For the code, just think of that as a very short handle. That it's not like registered site codes. It's really all about something recognizable to you that provides a very short identifier that you can use elsewhere in the system.
So, and then after you enter in the equipment, you can go under Manage Equipment and then view your list, or you can edit. If the delete option is not available, it's because this a piece of equipment was used on an application, so you need to delete that application before you can delete the equipment. Next, we have technicians. Technicians are the people that work for you that are applying the pesticides. So we need their first name, their last name, and then the certification number. So all three of these are required. And same thing here. If you want to, if there's someone you want to delete because they no longer work for you, you need to make sure you delete all the applications that they.
You wouldn't do that, right? You wouldn't delete applications.
Right.
Yeah.
And lastly are the mixes. So the mixes are the same thing, a short identifier that you will use to call up the mix, and you need to provide the product. So the product would be we don't allow you to just select from the list. You have to start typing. So you can either start typing the name, or you can use if you know the number, you can start typing in the DPR registration number. Because this list of products is quite comprehensive. So in many cases there are multiple products with the same name. So try to match up the registration number. So you select the product, the amount that you're using, and then the unit for that you're using in the mix. And then if you mix it with something else like water, then you can define how much water you're using. One of the things that has come up is for people that actually just use straight product and don't mix it with anything else. What you need to do is make sure that you just define the product, and so define a default unit for the product, and then just create that as a mix without anything else. And the last thing for mixes is if you are using mosquito fish, you would omit the product and just select mosquito fish and then define how many you're using. If you have a product such as a briquette that you don't know the exact no, I'm sorry. If you're using a briquette, you still need to define the weight of the product. Otherwise, because the weights, we don't actually have the default weights in the database. So if you're using a briquette, try to put in the weight that's on the package. So after you define those three things, you'll be able to go in. The last thing you need to define are the sources. Sources differ from sites slightly because we allow sources to be not just all the sites in the system are points. For sources, you can also define your sources as points, but we also allow you to define them as polygons or as lines. So going from the beginning, sources, the codes have to be a number. They have, I believe it's a 9-digit number, and then under name, you can just type in whatever you want to help you identify it, and then the address. One of the the things that's pretty important is if it is a water of the US, you need to click off this checkbox. That way, any applications made to this source will allow us to add these to NPDES reporting. And then once you select all that, you can define the shape of the source. So it can be either a point, or if you like, you can create a polygon. So start drawing it out, and once you're done, you can just double click and it will close it for you. And then if say you made a mistake and you wanted to adjust points, you can adjust them. And then once you're done, you can click add, and we're ready to add applications. So when you are creating an application, you want to select the source that you applied at. So you can start typing, and then you'll pick out the source from the menu. So you can either type the code or type in part of the name that you created. And then once you select it, it will show you the source that you selected. After you define the source, you can select the purpose, the technicians, equipment, mixes, and then once you define, say what mix you use, you still want to say how much of that mix was applied at that location. And then the area that you covered.
And in this case, the system does the conversion. So if, let's say you have your tank mix defined in gallons, but you applied 2 ounces, you can put that here and that's fine because the system knows how to convert all the units.
And also, we have it so that you can select, say you did an application and not at a registered source, you can quickly define it. So say, I don't know exactly what this is, but you know that you went here and you applied pesticide here. You can quickly define it and it will label it as a one-time source. So we can still track your application without it being tied to an explicit source. And then when you're done with everything, you hit save, and all your applications should show up. So I know a lot of agencies aren't using this section yet, but once you start using it, this is the kind of information that you'll get out of it. Once you actually put the pesticides in, we have automatic reporting to county ag commissioners. That's through the pesticide use reports. So after you start putting in your application data, you can set up the pesticide use reports. So under settings, you can define all of the counties that you are reporting to. So once you can select the county, and then you need to type in your permit number. One of the things that has come up is that you need to make sure that at the start of every year you get your new permit number, because even if the permit number doesn't change in the county ag commissioner's site, if you don't reapply for it, it won't let you submit data. And if you want to submit the usage reports automatically every month, you can click this checkbox and then to define the day of the month that you want to send it on. If you want to send it on the 1st or the 10th or whenever you want, and just click that here and they can update it. So we allow you to report to more than one county in case your district covers more than one county, or you only do one county but you actually apply over county lines for whatever reason. You can define extra counties here. Whoops. After you specify the settings, you could see if you have them pesticide reports sent automatically each month, these will compile for you automatically on whatever day you specify, and they'll be sent. Otherwise, I know Peter likes to do this manually just so he can look over the numbers that are being sent. So you can define which month. This defaults to whatever the previous month is, and then set the year, and then click generate, and it will generate a pesticide use report for you automatically. Once it's generated, you can view what the numbers are, and it gives you a printable form that looks, what I'm told, is like what used to be sent manually. And so you can quickly look over all the numbers, make sure everything is what you expected it to be. And then there will be, this button will be a submit button if it hasn't been submitted, and you click that, and it will automatically send it to CalAg permits. And then if it's already been submitted, it will tell you that. And then if you say you created too many reports, you can delete the extra reports. And
the fact that those say submitted indicates that those reports already went to the CalAg permits system.
Yeah. And then we wanted to mention that resistance, you can put in resistance testing, but as of now, the resistance testing procedures are being updated, so we need to adjust some things. And there's not a lot of people that this would cover, so we're not going to go over the how to put in the resistance testing.
Right now, the resistance data entry consists of larval bioassays and adult bottle bioassays, and we do plan to deal with the KDR and other PCR testing that Cdph is doing, as well as some of the enzyme assays. So those will be modules coming online sometime in the future. Okay, so now we're going to transition to calculators. So those were the data entry modules, and that's how you get things into the gateway if you're going to directly enter data. So we wanted to mention the calculators that are available. Many of you use these. These are the ways to start making use of what's in the gateway. So the first calculator is Arthropod Abundance Anomaly. And what that's really looking at is your counts of mosquitoes in most cases and comparing those to past trends in mosquito counts to see whether this year is unusual in any way for your chosen species. There's also infection rate calculators, which calculate the prevalence of virus infection in the mosquito population. Skipping risk assessment for a moment, there's also a vector index calculator, which really couples these first two calculators. It takes how many mosquitoes do you have, what fraction of them are infected, combines those to estimate how many infected mosquitoes you have out there based on your trap data. And then bringing it all together is the risk assessment calculator, which is derived from the state mosquito-borne virus surveillance and response plan that Cdph organizes. And that's available on the West Nile website. This is an online implementation of that allows you to filter the data in different ways and get those risk numbers. So I'll step through those and try to be as efficient as I can so that we can finish in time to take any questions. So starting with the Arthropod Abundance Anomaly calculator, waiting for it to load just for a second. We'll choose Shasta's agency here. Bypass. Oh, it's at the top. That's right.
No, it's already selected.
Oh, that's right. Shasta is not my peer because I am Shasta. Okay, so you don't even need to deal with that first one unless you have other agencies neighboring you that you need to make calculations for. I'll pick the last year, for example, 2015. I want to see mosquito abundance by disease week. You can also choose month, which is obvious what that means. Half month is just the first and second halves of each month, sort of split into roughly 2-week periods. And disease week, of course, is weekly, going by the epi weeks that CDPH and CDC use. And you can also specify custom date ranges. So I'll pick disease week just for convenience, so 2015 by disease week. You can also spatially filter the data. So if you've defined your own polygons as spatial features in the system, I'll talk more about that in just a minute, how to do that. You can filter on your own polygons. In this particular case, you can see I've got a choice here of Shasta County. I can go by the district boundaries. In this case, Tehama County is presumably a neighboring agency of Shasta, which they are. I assume they share data. So you can turn those on and off depending on how you want to filter it. In this case, I'm going to click Include for Shasta, Mosquito, and Vector Control District. The first thing it warns you is that it has a lot of vertices, which means a lot of points along the edge of the polygon. So if you just click Cancel, that says, hey, I don't want to edit that polygon, so just treat it as is. And that's just a little more efficient. But you see that it now displays here, and there's now Include changed to Remove below, so you can see that. And so what this will do is then filter all the data to only what's within that boundary of the agency. Scroll down, we have other filters available. Here we have a variety of species listed, and those are again the ones that are chosen for your agency. Species group is based on typical groupings for reporting. So Culex tarsalis in this case and Culex pipiens complex would be two species of interest in the Shasta area. Pipiens complex, of course, includes pipiens, quinquefasciatus, or any hybrids. So in the system, you usually call them one thing or other for your agency. This just lumps them. Treating each selected species group independently. If you want to actually do separate calculations for each species, you can. In the interest of time, I'll just leave them lumped here. But if you check that box, you'll get a separate set of calculations for each species as well as separate graphs. I'm going to leave it defaulting to all the female mosquitoes. And then also I'll pick CO2 beta traps. You could also throw in Gravid or tell it also to calculate them separately for each trap type. And then click Calculate. You can usually leave the mean type as the default, but there's a variety of choices if you want to get into the details. And what happens is it does a quick calculation, briefly shows you as the time's ticking while it's doing the calculation, and then you get this output that looks kind of like a spreadsheet. It tells you what the 2015 numbers are. It tells you the historical mean to compare that against, and then the percent difference, the percent change from the historical mean. It also tells you how many years are in that historical mean. So in some cases, you might have not happened to run traps in that particular week, especially in the early season. So only 2012 contributed to this particular mean. So that's really 2012's value versus 2015's value. But in most periods, you have all of the years represented. So it takes the most recent 5-year period prior. And perhaps the more interesting thing is you can either download this calculation and look at it yourself in a spreadsheet. I won't do that in the interest of time, but that just outputs a text file that you can open in Microsoft Excel, or you can view the graphs. So when you view the graphs, what pops up is a graph showing the changes in abundance over time. You can hold your mouse over particular values to see what those values are. And then along the bottom of the graph, you have all of your filters. So here I picked Shasta, no peer agencies, CO2 beta traps, Culex tarsalis and Culex pipiens complex, mixed females, and so on. So it shows you a readout of all of your filters. And the other thing you can do is interact with these. So the blue line is the mean, and then the red line is what's going on in 2015. So a lot of districts would use this as the season progresses, and you can watch how your line departs or doesn't depart from the mean. If you want to see individual past years, you might want to turn the mean off and then turn on individual past years. So you can turn on as many of these as you like. And you notice the graph is sort of scaled to the maximum over that period. So that gives you an idea of how you're comparing to past years that get pretty noisy if you add all of them, but it's useful to be able to decide that. You could do all of that graphing yourself by just outputting the data if you wanted to do it in your own software. Okay, so that's the abundance calculator. Let's go to the infection rate calculator. A lot of the filters are similar between these different calculators. Okay, so again, I won't worry about the peer agency because I'm just going to do it for Shasta. In this case, you can either put in a custom date range, put in a disease week choice. So I'll go back to 2015. It gives a readout of all the disease weeks in 2015. What you want to choose here is the last one that's of interest. So I'll kind of focus on the surveillance season and pick from the 18th to 24th of October last year. So that's week 42. And then what you decide is how many periods do you want, including that one and prior, to calculate. So I know that's week 42, so I'll pick, say, 25 weeks prior, which will take it all the way back to week 18, I guess. So that will get me back into the spring when there presumably were negative collections for virus. So that's going to go by week. If you chose month and you put a number, that's the number of months. In this case, because I chose week, that'll be the number of weeks. I'm not going to worry about filtering, but you can do all the same spatial filtering as before. I'll again pick Tarsalis and the Pipiens complex. You can either hold Shift or hold Control when you're doing this to select multiple options. Female mosquitoes, which are usually the only ones tested for virus. And I'll pick carbon dioxide baited traps. This is the default. Again, you can leave the choice of the way of estimating it. This is a maximum likelihood estimate of the infection rate, just a statistical thing. And then MIR is the old way of just assuming one infected mosquito in any positive pool. So that's the minimum infection rate. I usually just leave that on MLE, which will also give you confidence intervals. We want the 95% confidence interval usually. And then this just says per how many mosquitoes. So the way we typically report infection rates is per 1,000. So this just means do it per 1,000. Again, just accept the defaults is usually the way to go. Click calculate. That was very fast. So you can notice from the spreadsheet, these are numbers of pools tested during 2015. And if you scroll down, you're seeing also number of individual mosquitoes in the right column. And it also tells you how many of those pools were positive in the next to last column. So you notice some of them are starting to be positive in summer. And then you get the infection rate estimates and the confidence intervals. You can output those again as a spreadsheet. So you could download those, unzip the file, and then you would have the spreadsheet, or you can view the graphs. And what that shows you, much the same as before, is point estimates for calculations. So that gives you your estimated infection rate in the population. If you don't test a lot of mosquitoes, you'll see huge confidence intervals. So if you tested one pool and it was positive, that's not going to give you a great estimate for, or a high degree of certainty for what the infection rate is in the population. So in that case, you'd have a really wide confidence interval that just means you still don't know a lot about what the infection rate is. So these confidence intervals get smaller and smaller the more pools you test. That gives you some indication of your uncertainty. You can hold the cursor over any particular value to get that value per 1,000 mosquitoes, which is what we chose. If you wanted to do multiple years, you notice that this particular graph doesn't overlay them. So the way you would do that is just calculating a lot of historical periods. So you could actually see over multiple years how things are going. So if I had chosen weeks and chosen 200 historical periods, then that would give me about 4 years worth of data. Okay, so that's the infection rate calculator. And just for the moment, I'm going to skip risk assessment because that sort of brings everything together. Vector index calculator, much the same way as what we just did, will bring the first two calculators' information together to give you an estimate of the abundance of infected female mosquitoes. So again, 2015, choose half month in this case, so I'll just pick the first and second halves of the months. So there'll be 24 half months in a year. Just for fun, I'll include the Shasta filter. So now that shows up on the map. Oh yeah, getting a little too fast here. All right, and then target is West Nile virus. I forgot to mention that on the infection rate calculator. If your agency happened to have SLE or Western equine or eventually Zika or who knows what, you could choose other targets for the viruses. Usually it's West Nile. Culex tarsalis and pipiens. Just leave that alone in the interest of time, but all the same options apply. You can calculate them together or separately. Trap night restrictions. Sometimes you want to not include traps, for example, in abundance calculations that were run over a really long period of time, maybe because somebody failed to pick it up or something like that. This just lets you put limits on that. I'm going to choose the same default for the point estimate and click calculate. You'll notice these that bring together multiple pieces of information take a bit longer. So we're watching the time elapse, and it gives you, it says of 600 seconds. So the default's to let it run for 10 minutes, which is not normal. So unless you put in, you want 400 time periods and carving the data up 16 ways, then 10 minutes might not be long enough. You'll see the usual output. So vector index comes out. And what this is the abundance multiplied by the infection rate. So for the points where you have both pieces of data, you get an estimate. So here, the abundance was 2.4 females per trap night, but none were infected. So that still means your estimate is 0 infected females per trap night. So you keep going through this and you'll start getting higher numbers. And you can, again, output it as a spreadsheet or view the graphs. In this case, here's the 2015 vector index. So these values may be a little hard to read if you don't think about vector index a lot, but they're really useful as a relative number over multiple years. So what you'll notice, the Sacramento Valley's had a lot of West Nile activity in recent years. So 2015 maybe looks a little high. 2014, still a little high. 2013. And then as you go back in time, you'll notice there were better years for West Nile where it was quite low. So that's a really useful relative indicator. One question I've gotten is sort of what kind of threshold you can put on this number to really help make decisions. And we're actually starting a study right now to try to see how generalizable that is, supported by a number of your agencies. And Orange County's worked as the pass-through for that. And we hope to have some thresholds and see how generalizable those are across the state. But this is a really useful way to bring in the how many mosquitoes do you have and how many are infected, all as one estimate to help you make decisions based on the entomological data. All right, and then finally, the risk assessment calculator is the one that's derived directly from the state mosquito-borne virus surveillance and response plan. That's the one available on the West Nile website. I think all of you are familiar with the response plan. But that table and that produces risk estimates is translated into code in this calculator. So we'll again choose 2015, just do half months, and then skipping the spatial filters, targets West Nile. This is one that might not be immediately obvious. This buffer distance here in kilometers is defaulting to 150 miles. And what you'll notice in the response plan is that there are indications of risk based on the immediate area, and then there also there's broad region and specific region is actually the terminology. So the broad region is what this definition is all about. So the specific region is assumed to be the spatial location that you specify. It's either your agency, or if you define a spatial feature, it's that spatial feature. And what this does is allow you to define what do you mean by a broad region. So you can modify this value. The default is 150 miles, which sort of gets your region's data. So 150 miles in the Sacramento Valley for Shasta might include everybody sort of down to the Sacramento area. So that's the idea. If you've got positives for West Nile in your general area, that's a higher risk. And then if you've got positives in your specific area, meaning your agency, that's an even higher risk. So the response plan is all about grading that risk based on how nearby the positives are. Pick Culex tarsalis and the pipiens complex, our favorite vectors of West Nile. I'll throw in gravid traps here and then just leave everything else at the default. The other thing you might want is some sort of lag to keep calling dead birds a risk factor, because sometimes you close zip codes and you know the area is positive, so you want to presume for some period of time that there's still high risk. So this carcass period just defines that lag. So it says after the last positive dead birds, still keep the risk high related to dead birds for an additional 30 days. So you can change that if there's a need to. Click calculate, and then that will sometimes run a bit longer than other calculators just because this is pulling in sentinel chickens, dead birds, mosquito infections, mosquito abundance, and temperature values, and then giving you a report for your agency. Just wait for it to finish. And here's what you get. So this gives you, for all of our specifications, which are all listed here, the overall risk level, and that again is based on Tarsalis and Pipiens complex, which I chose, CO2 and gravitraps combined. Environment is really temperature, so you have that for any particular period, and these are for the half months of the year. So in this case, you can hold your mouse over them to see what they mean, but that's the ending date for that half month. So you can see the increase here. Yellow means normal season conditions by the response plan. Orange means emergency planning, and red means epidemic conditions. So what this says for your agency is that, for Shasta in this case, the temperatures were not very suitable for West Nile in the winter, quite obvious. But then during this part of the year, from early June through early October, they were somewhat, or let's say through end of August, I guess, were at epidemic levels. So that temperatures were quite suitable for transmission. The abundance-based risk is compared to historical averages, so it was higher than normal, especially in the early season. Infection rates were high during this period from late July to late August. Ciro conversions also occurred, so you can see some variation in going from 2 to a 5 to a 3. And then dead birds as well were also being picked up during parts of the season. And then that all gets averaged as it does in the response plan to give you an overall risk. And when it exceeds 4, that would be epidemic conditions. So it got right to the threshold of epidemic conditions, but no higher. You can download the data as a spreadsheet, and that'll give you the output of all of this in a spreadsheet. Or if you click download report, actually I won't do that in the interest of time, but when you click that, that will download a PDF of this readout. So if you want a PDF file that shows you this picture of your conditions, you can do that. And that is about it for calculators. Our plans for calculators are to integrate what Jodi showed with applications with what we do with surveillance, to have additional calculators that allow you to pair those data. With that, I'll turn it over to Jodi to talk about some of the connections and configuration.
Let's see. So one of the things that we have is we have ways of importing and exporting your data, either through spreadsheets or, as you've heard mentioned probably several times, is the web services. So I'll go over the import and export with the CSVs. So anything that you put into the gateway, you can export. So you can go to Tools and then Data Tools and then Export Data, and you select what type of data you want to export, and it'll give you some filtering options if you like. And then once you click Export, you will get so one of the filtering options for collections, you'll see this option, which is export data in spreadsheet format. If you select all available species, it will, every species that you collected, no matter even if you collected one trap had multiple species in it, it will put a row for every single species. If you click this button, it will put all the species in a column, so each trap will have it will be a very wide row with all the species available.
The other note of caution on exporting collections in particular is that it's a good idea, even if you want to analyze only one species, it's a good idea to just leave all available species checked, because one risk is that if you pick only a certain species, the gateway only exports collections that had that species. So if you had 0 of that species, those are still important collections for your analysis. And the zeros, of course, matter, but they would be excluded if you get too specific with the species. So I actually always use all available species as the option.
So this is in the format, this is the export where every species is its own row. So it creates many more rows, and usually you want to check this box and then get the wide format. After you export data, we allow you to import data. So you can upload, you select what type of data you want to upload, and then you browse for the file, and then the rules for creating the spreadsheet are on the side here. You can click this and you will get an example spreadsheet, which has the rules for all of the data types, and then also sample lists for each type of data. So you can use this as a guideline for creating your data exports if you have a way of exporting the data from if you use maybe a different set of software to collect everything, you can export it and then import it into the gateway. You just have to match this column format. The order doesn't really matter. It's the important thing is the headers. And lastly, if you have the ability if you have software that hooks into the gateway, or you're looking to figure out how to do that, you can use web services. So most of the time, people have been contacting me about how to get web services connected. But if you click right here, this will send you to the specifications for how to do that. So usually this would require someone to program the hookup for you, but if some of the software packages have already done this. And the last thing we wanted to cover is a little bit of the account settings that a lot of people might not be aware of. So anytime you have a gateway account, you can go under settings and then my account and personal information, and you can adjust your username and your email address. One of the things that comes up a lot is that if you're receiving automatic emails from the gateway, there's several notifications that go out, and maybe you don't want to receive them, or you're not receiving them and you do want to receive them, you can go here and adjust your settings. So when we have test results come in, if you selected yes on here, you would be notified of mosquito test results or dead bird test results. So a lot of people have emailed me saying, hey, I don't want to receive these emails anymore. So this is where you would adjust that if you wanted to. If you needed to change your password, you can go under security details. And then if you wanted to change, like you didn't like how the date was formatted in the gateway, or you wanted to change some of your other formatting options, you have the ability to change all those here. Or say you wanted to go to metric or change from metric, you can change that here. The last thing I wanted to cover is, the last two things. A lot of times I will get contacted about adding people to get gateway accounts. And usually every agency will have someone set as an agency manager. And our policy as far as gateway accounts is we like to have each agency manage their own users. That way they know who has access to their data and they can control it, rather than we're the ones that control it for you. Because as Chris said before, it's your data that you put in the gateway. We're housing it for you, but it's not our data, and we're not the ones to decide who can access it or not. So if you need to create a new account for your agency, you would have to log in as an agency manager. So this account I set to agency manager. And so by doing that, you can go under my agency and then user management, and you can click add new user here, and you can create as many users for as many people in your that work for you that you want. And also, this is how you revoke access. To say if someone got fired or no longer worked for you, you can go select that person and you can remove them from having access to your agency.
Deactivate does not delete the person's existence in the system, so any records associated with that person would remain, but deactivating them just means that person is no longer needing access to your agency's data.
So there's three levels of an account. You can create them as a user, which is able to add data and view all the data in the system. You can set view only, which can't add new data but can view the data that you have currently. Or you can do an agency manager account, which will allow that account to create new accounts and to revoke accounts to your site. And another thing that we allow agents, like if you have an account and you wanted to access data from another agency, rather than go through us, you can go to other agency access and request access to another agency's data, and that doesn't have to go through us. It's just between the two agencies that they can decide if that should happen. So you can click New Agency Access, and then find the agency you want to access data to, and then submit a request. This will create an email notification as well as a notification here, which will show you all your access requests. So I set an access request from my other account that says view only to Shasta. So here, Peter can decide whether he wants to grant or deny this request, and you can communicate however you want about that. Or if say you talk to someone and they said, hey, we'd like to if you don't mind, we can look at your data. So you can view all of the accounts in the gateway, and then if there's someone that asks you for access personally, you can just click on grant, and that would provide them access to your data. The last thing, as far as web services goes, if you have programmers that are working to hook your software up to the gateway, and they need to have access to the gateway through what's called a token. So you need to have an agency manager account, go to agency tokens, and then click on new token, and then create new token. Then you send them this piece of information right here under token, and they'll have the specifications on how to use that to log into the gateway through the web services. So, or if you granted access to a programmer and you don't want that application to access your data anymore, you can click on expire, and that will revoke access through that token. So the token is basically a username and password setup that will go behind the scenes, so you don't have to worry about managing passwords.
All right, so I think that concludes the formal part of the session, and sorry it took a while, but there's even still things that we didn't cover, like the testing entry, so we can have questions now. I noticed Kelly Middleton, or perhaps Greater LA more broadly, had a question. So Kelly, if I'll try to unmute you, and if you want to go ahead and ask your question. If others have questions, if you can just click the little hand in your software to raise your hand, then maybe we can do this in an orderly fashion. So Kelly, I think you're unmuted, as long as you're unmuted on your end. Is there a question from Greater LA? Or anyone else? Oh, okay. Kelly wrote me a chat message saying, sorry, it wasn't me. So someone may be logged in as you. Okay, I see another. Okay, some questions are starting to come in. Let me read them. I'll try to take them in order here. So I see one from Xiaoming at San Joaquin. says, in site management, is it possible to show just active sites and hide all of the inactive sites? Go to manage sites.
We don't have a specification of whether a site is active or not.
Yeah, I guess
If
that's
you
right.
if you
There's no
delete the
deactivate.
deleting it is what deactivates it. It doesn't actually delete it from the system, but it won't show up for you anymore. It's still in the database historically, but this is essentially deactivating it. But the only thing is, once you hit this, there's not a mechanism to undelete it for you. I mean,
Yeah,
you can contact me and I can do it, but
right. So if you do delete sites, if you ever resurrected that site for some reason, you should be prepared to just recreate it as a new site. There'd really be nothing wrong with that as long as it was in the correct spatial location in both situations. Okay, Carrie Swoboda asks, for adding applications, what certification number do you use for seasonals?
So the certification number is it should populate automatically from the continuing ed database. But it's not very strict about what number you put in. So actually, Shasta didn't put in the real numbers; they put in their own codes. So if you can put in a temp number if you need for seasonals.
Okay, if I understand the question right, they're probably talking about people who actually don't have their own certification number and maybe applying under someone else's.
Yeah, this doesn't check against any data. So
Okay.
it's a requirement because everyone's technically is supposed to have a certification number, is what I'm told. But
Yes.
I know seasonals might not fall under this, so you can put in just whatever you want there. You can type in seasonal, and that will work. And then as far as how to replay this webinar, we are recording it, and then we'll send out information about how to review this again.
Yes, so we will provide that and a link to the webinar afterward for those who want to watch it later. Ed Prendez asks, how often are new chemicals added to the database? So that's actually a nightly import from the California Department of Pesticide Regulation. So if it's registered, it should be in there. It's almost live from their database.
If it's not, then please let me know, because there's thousands of chemicals in there, so I'm not able to tell if something is missing or not. But if there is something missing, let me know and I'll figure out what's going on.
Okay, Paula just reminded me of something I was supposed to cover and forgot.
Oh.
So let me talk about spatial features, because that's your way of spatially filtering data using the calculators. Thank you, Paula. So under tools, there are spatial tools here, one of which is a geocoder, which you can use to translate addresses generally into latitude and longitude points. You can enter your own if you want. But the other one is spatial features, and that is pretty important because you may want to carve up your district into different spatial units that then you can work with or do calculations on in a quick way that are regions of your state.
The orange arrow, because you need that menu on the side.
Okay. So what comes up for your agency is usually a Google map that's centered on the middle of your agency. Let's say I want to create this area north of 299 and west of I-5 as a region within my district. So you can type a name for the spatial feature. So I'll just say Northwest Reading.
And these are saved to your account.
And these are associated with your user. So only your user would see it by default. If you want everyone in your agency to see the spatial features you're creating, you just check that box there. And then we'll create sorry, I was already on a new feature.
Yeah,
sorry. All right, Northwest Reading, share with agency, and we'll add a polygon. So that gives me the ability to start drawing on the map. So you can draw in whatever level of detail makes sense to you. Usually you want to be detailed enough so that the divisions will be right in the end. Not going to be quite as careful on the webinar as I would be if I were doing this in reality. But you can put as many little vertices as you want, be as detailed as you want. Zoom out a bit, keep drawing. So let's say that's my Northwest Reading spatial feature. So now, after I've created that spatial feature, it's important to save the feature. So that's saving it with the name I created. If you wanted to save it as something else, you could create it as a new feature with a different name. Of course, you can delete them and so on. So what happens now is that, can I see that immediately?
Yeah, have to.
So if I search Reading here, then now there's my Northwest Reading feature. You can export that, which I believe outputs a shapefile. But if you want to just see it, you can show it up in the map. So because I'm actively drawing on that, it's actually shown twice, but you can show or hide it. And then you can also edit it. So if you say I want to edit it, then I can click that, say OK. That's just warning me that I have not saved what I was working on before. So now I'm in the process of editing this one. And just like Jodi was showing before, if you realize, let's say there's a vertex in the wrong place, then you can move those. So you can adjust as needed. If you want to create a new one, the ones that kind of look shadowy can be adjusted as well to create new vertices. And then when you're done, again, just click Save Feature. And so that feature is now available. So if I go over to calculators, I'm just going to quickly do the abundance one again. And everyone else in my agency would now see that same spatial feature. So you can draw as many of those as you like. 2015, half month. And then you go down here and you notice Northwest Reading is now an option. It's created by this bogus webinar ID that Jodi created. Include, and now when I include that, you see the spatial feature appear above. So now we can go through our same process as we did before, and we'll get calculations specifically for that spatial area. And the other advantage, yes, is that if you create pieces of your district that are relevant from an epidemiological standpoint, and you care about West Nile risk in different places, if I had created different parts of the district, I could pick them all here by just clicking include on all of them, say treat each mapped feature independently, and so it will create separate calculations for each of those spatial features.
And then, shapefile. Right here.
Yeah, and there is a way, if you do import features, if you have your own features that you've done in ArcGIS or other GIS software, you create an Esri shapefile from those, you can actually zip that collection of files that are a shapefile into a zip file and then specify that file and import those straight into the database. So that's a way that doesn't require you to draw them here, and instead you could draw them in other software. If you already have them created and you've got 50 parts of your district defined in another piece of GIS software, this is the way to get those in the system. So you'd specify a zip file, then they'll appear as a new file with you as the owner, or a new spatial feature with you as the owner. And in reverse, you can also export them as well, which takes them from what you drew here into a shapefile that you could use elsewhere. And this just describes what a spatial feature is for some help along the side. We have one more question from Ed Prendez, which we just answered, I guess. So you can add your own shapefiles. Ed says, can you add your own shapefiles or your own aerial map? We do not have a way to add your own aerial map at the moment, just because this is all built on Google Maps. So there is satellite imagery if you toggle it to satellite. But adding your own aerial map is something we haven't addressed at this point. Is that even possible?
I'm not sure right now.
Okay, we can look into that if that's an issue, but Google Maps works the way Google Maps works, and we're building on top of it. So we'd have to figure out if there's a way to add that to their structure. Are there other questions? Looking for hands raised as well. Okay, well, seeing none, I want to thank all of you for, first of all, your participation in this system. It's been a great collaboration. I think it really elevates our state in terms of national stature, the fact that all of these structures work and so many agencies are connected to them and collaborating. It's something other states would like to be doing, I think. So certainly we benefit in terms of the research, and we hope you do too. So if you have ideas for tools, we're always getting those and trying to keep a priority list of things to do. And going forward, we're always trying to figure out how to keep all this funded. So we'll plan to keep the development going on new tools for the gateway. We have this new NASA grant, not as new anymore. It's a year in on invasive 80s. So a number of the tools, and particularly what Jodi mentioned with presence absence traps and inspections and larval collections that you can now record in the gateway, are really aimed at collecting data on invasive 80s. So for those of you dealing with 80s aegypti, 80s albopictus, and 80s nodoscriptus at this point, there are ways to enter those data in the gateway as well. It was largely built in 2006, really, when on some of Bill Reisen's grants and in collaboration with all of you to address QLEX and West Nile issues, and we're retooling parts of it for invasive 80s. The map Jodi's showing now is just our live map of what's in the gateway for the invasive 80s, particularly 80s aegypti and 80s albopictus. The blue areas there are 80s albopictus, and then red is the areas where 80s aegypti have been detected, and purple is where they're both detected. You can click on individual cities, and that provides a pass-through to your own agency websites, as well as an indication of the number of detections for 80s. All right, so I don't see any further questions. If you have individual questions or points unique to your agency, feel free to email us. And I appreciate all of your attendance today, and we'll look forward to working with you this year.
Thank you, everyone.